Good evening. Welcome to another work night in my life. So today what we're going to be doing is I'm going to take a second, first of all, to do some important work for my remote job that I need to have for a meeting in the morning. Unfortunately, my schedule changes every single week, so I unfortunately have to go to one of my other jobs early in the morning now, so I will be leaving early morning, and I just have to make sure that I have this ready for that. Then I'm gonna make dinner. Then the thing that I actually want to work on, which I'll be working on in this video, is that I've been reading more texts for my literature review. If you watched the last one by chance, my goal is to have 40 texts, but upon further observation, I realized that really I should have probably above 60 texts. And 40 was really too little, so I'm now aiming for 40. I have a lot saved on my iPad that I'm excited to read, but I've also been reading quite a bit. And I think the thing with my literature review is that I've been feeling nervous to get a little bit lost in the midst of all of these texts and all this information that I'm reading. What I'm gonna do is that in the last video, even though I said I was working on my literature review, I actually ended up sort of doing more of like a little outline sort of moment for my introduction. I still have a little bit of I have some extra thoughts that I want to already start to pour into that, but now we're actually going to be getting more into literature review territory, because I don't have to submit this to anybody. It's just for myself to help guide me through the text and to make sure that I can write my introduction well. So it's going to be a very sort of minimal sort of literature review, minimalistic. I'm just going to go through all the texts that I have so far and pull out, I want to have everything ready for when I actually write my introduction, because, again, this has been a learning process for me. I've been learning a lot through just simple observation of the texts that I've been reading and, trying to figure out how to emulate them myself in my own work. And I have just noticed that sometimes I get very information heavy, but actually I don't even need to go into quotes too much or quote anything that they said too much, but what I've observed is that most of the literature reviews just explained themselves really concisely what all of the authors that they read or whatever, all the things they wanted to explain what they said, and then included they were doing a lot of accumulate. I keep turning orange. Anyways, they were doing a lot of just compiling things together and sort of formatting them into really sort of simplified versions of what they read. I know that's obvious if you are if you're in science or whatever, but I guess I was observing that myself to see how I write an appropriate literature review. I think my big research that I did was writing an undergraduate thesis, and in my undergraduate thesis, because it was very humanities based, it was not that smaller format of a scientific article. It was a lot. I could pull a lot from a lot of different texts, and you'd spend a lot of time, I think, in humanities papers really digging into a certain author, or really digging into their ideas and your sort of take on their ideas. And I noticed, I'm sure maybe if you're writing a dissertation or something for your PhD, it might still be like that in the science world, but I just noticed that in research articles, it is not like that at all. You don't want to be being this person said this and this and this, and I think this and this and that, and let's spend a whole paragraph on this person's idea. It's no, just short, simple, explain the concepts. So yeah, as somebody coming from humanities, I think it's just been a learning process reading these research articles, and sort of, I think in the past when I read sort of scientific articles, I don't think that I really was realizing just how many texts were actually going in to these introductions. I think I read them thinking sort of more that, I know it's a bit silly, but thinking that maybe the authors themselves are sort of just knew this, or I think I just wasn't really taking into account how many texts actually go into writing something that's really only 2-3 pages, these introductions. So I'm sure the text will also bleed into things like my discussion section, but yeah, it's been a very interesting experience as a humanities person. So So yeah, so we're gonna be doing that today, and I'm gonna hop into Zoom at that point and show you. But for now, we are just going to work on my remote job that I will not show you because you don't need to see all that, but I'll talk. I'm gonna chat while I do this remote jobs work because I do not need to be as mentally engaged for this. My research is about something called structural dissociation, and which is what a lot of the texts I've been reading about in the last few days it's been about. And it's kind of funny because, okay, the whole point of structural dissociation is that you have your like main self that moves through the day, and then you have an emotional part or multiple emotional parts that are basically little fragments of yourself that get sort of, oh, I just tried to sign into my Microsoft with my Gmail account. But basically little fragments of yourself that get sort of stuck in time, and these little chunks of you. I don't know how to put it, but I guess structural dissociation joke must be the first time someone's made a structural dissociation joke, but I feel like my life recently and just navigating these jobs has kind of been like a structural dissociation experience for me, because I feel like I have my normal jobs that I go through. It's my ANP. My normal jobs that I have to navigate throughout the day. And, like, I have to pretend that I am, like, this is it. This is my life, and I'm invested in this, and, like, I'm so all in. And then it's, like, but in reality, I have, like, this secret other little part of me, which is this. And I don't know how to put it, but I've been trying to, this is me trying to dissociate from these jobs that I don't want to do. This one, I'm happy to do my remote job, but it's less about the jobs themselves and the content, which actually the jobs are not bad, but it's more about just the fact that I have somewhere I want to be in life, and I'm just like, I feel like I'm like dissociating from these jobs by being like, this is all an illusion, this is all a prank, my real job is this, my real job is doing this study that I want to do. I don't know, that's a little bit, I don't know how to explain what it is that I'm feeling, but it's sort of like, I feel like I go home to, like, this is, like, my real life to me, is, like, doing this work and just being, like, I'm gonna be a researcher one day, I want to study this one day, I hope I'm a neuroscientist one day, and then I have to go and, like, engage in all these other sorts of activities that I'm sort of just, like, I don't know how to put it, but yeah, it just has been feeling a little bit like a dissociative experience in a way, and it's been really interesting. But I'm very grateful to have these jobs, and they've been enjoyable. I mean, there's still a good chunk of them. Some of them have zero to do with anything because they're just random side jobs, but some of them do have to do with psychology, and that has been really enjoyable for me. And I have honestly still been learning, like, a lot, but I'm truly looking forward to the day where I'm only my ANP, I'm an integrated person, and I'm just only doing my jobs that I care about and not splitting myself into other things. Because this feels like, I don't know, I just feel like I identify so much with the work that I'm doing in terms of, like, I identify with this process so much and the kind of activities that I'm doing, the writing, the reading, and I'm like, I just want to do this, and it's been a little bit like I don't really identify with my other jobs. They're kind of just jobs that I'm doing to make ends meet or just to advance myself, you know, like, okay, this is what I have to do to get to where I need to go, but it's not really, you know, it's not like, oh my gosh, I'm doing what I hope I do this forever kind of stuff, you know what I mean? Anyways, I was having a little bit of a cathartic day today, even though I was kind of having an emotionally difficult day in some ways, but I was just really sitting with everything that got me to this point and all of my influences, the journey that I went through with my mental health. I think I wrote everything down for the first time and was actually thinking, like, I don't know, I think it's been really striking me recently that no matter what, this project is going to finish. Like, it is going to get done. And I think when I was starting, I had so many doubts, like, am I going to carry through with this? Is it going to work? And I think as I've gone through the process, I've been like, wow, my consistency is crazy. Like, I didn't expect myself to be as consistent as I've been. And it's just been kind of beautiful and just giving me this faith that, like, yes, this is going to get done and it's going to get done in the next few months. And that's been something that's, like, it's just weird to, like, I can't wrap my head around the fact that I'm going to have, like, my own work just finished. Like, that's really cool. And like all of this hard work that I've been doing is gonna be done. That's been pretty It's been pretty magical for me, and I'm really looking forward. I'm enjoying the process right now, like, a lot, so I'm not in a rush, but I'm really looking forward to what this is going to be at the end of the day. But I was sitting with a lot of my influences. I was thinking about the first text I ever read that got me into psychology was Wretched of the Earth by Franz Fanon. I'm sorry, French people, for not pronouncing that with a French accent. But that was the text that really, like, after reading that, it made me feel, like, extremely understood at the time for the traumatic experience that I was going through, even though it wasn't about my traumatic experience, but it was basically, so if you've never heard of him, he was a black psychiatrist, French psychiatrist, and he was also a political philosopher, and he wrote a lot about race, colonialism. He wrote about, obviously, mental health because he was a psychiatrist. And in Wretched of the Earth, he is talking basically about the psychological effect, basically, of colonialization, and he's going through all these sort of psychoanalyses of all of these people that have been deeply wounded by, I think it was the Algerian Civil War. I think that's right. But anyways, he goes into how this struggle has shaped the consciousness of both the colonizers and the colonized, and the depth of mental illness that it has inflicted upon both sides. And he's just giving all these different accounts of trauma, of the trauma that they experience, and why, of all these psychoses and these sorts of dissociations. And it was really striking to me reading that at the time, and just the care and the love that he treated these cases with. And also, I think what really impacted me at the time was, just I think so often, I think in psychology we approach sickness from, I don't know, I think that or at least for me, when I have at that point, it still, I think, felt a lot like something wrong with you or something broken in you. And it's like we often look at the individual, the sick individual, rather than looking at the ways that society contributes to that sickness, the way that colonialization, like in that instance, colonialization led to the sickness, and all of the ways that sickness is so much more complicated than just a person and their mind being affected. I mean, that's not a very thorough way of describing, I guess, the depth of that book to me, but it really impacted me a lot to read that, and to read all of it just shows you how it just really humanized. I think it really humanized sickness for me and shaped the way that I viewed psychology a lot, coming from that perspective. And I feel like I'm forever a student of Franz Fanon. Like, he's somebody who has guided me a lot in terms of thinking about politics, thinking about psychology, and yeah, I'm just so grateful that I read that text. But anyways, I was thinking about him, and I was actually recently repurchased Wretched of the Earth, and I want to read it. So I've been thinking about that, and then I was thinking about all sorts of other, I was thinking about my own mental health journey and how it impacted the way that I've moved through this work and what it's meant for me to have experienced what I experienced. And yeah, I just really wrote it all down and felt some of the shame lift. I'm waiting to say all of this. I actually scripted this all out to talk about in a video, like almost like my last video that I want to make after I've already finished, where I want to actually delve into how my mental illness manifested. And I've never even shared it with people in my life, really, or even my therapist, because I felt so much confusion, and there was so much confusion in science and all these things, and it's basically what led me to do this work in the first place. But also having to navigate all the ways that I was too afraid to speak out to people about it. I had to develop my own framework to understand it, and I had to be constantly observing my own mind to sort of maintain a level of, like, sanity to at least appear okay. So that was kind of hectic, but it's been healing to finish this, and I think I'm just really excited for that. So that's gonna be like sort of my last video. Not my last video ever, but just like of this process, and then maybe hopefully I'll make like videos, hopefully of like, you know, oh, I'm putting this in a conference, or, you know, I'm going to my first academic conference or something like that. But yeah, so yeah, I was thinking about that. I was also sitting a lot today with this is again going my last video, the Kavanaugh trial, and all, oh my gosh, that's my first earliest memory of thinking about how this issue of memory has impacted survivors so deeply, and just the trauma also that like the collective trauma of that we have experienced, particularly as women. I think yeah, with this issue of memory, of like, are you sure you know what you're talking about? Why don't you remember it? Why can't you say everything? And it's a scientifically valid experience, but people will look for anything to discredit the stories of women, and now because of that we have a rapist in Supreme Court. And I was sitting with that today, and the more I actually delve into the science, the more frustration and just so there's just deep upset I feel for that case, and how similar our cases were, and the sort of rhetoric that was utilized, and the sort of like, are you sure you know what you're talking about? Why don't you remember it? Where'd your memory go? And like, why did you process it how you processed it? That women run into time and time again when we're experiencing something like that because of our biology, and it's not the fault of women, and it's not, I think we treat women speaking out like they are, what if they're liars and all of these things, and, you know, what if they're just fabricating? But yeah, but I was like, what if they're just fabricating things? And I think that we just run into that little narrative over and over again, and it's scientifically inaccurate. It's not a scientifically accurate narrative, and that's what upsets me so deeply. It's not based in science, and actually the science speaks for women time and time again, and will continue to speak for women more and more as we delve into this. But I think that already the science speaks so deeply to the reality of that experience, and yet men will do anything to keep rapists in office and keep rapists in Supreme Court and in power, because I guess, I don't know, maybe men are just okay with rape in a different way than women. You know, I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Maybe men are okay with it. It was just bringing up so much grief for me today, just so much, and anger, and just wow. And also the deep karma. Like it's I don't even want to say it's karmic, because at the end of the day it's not the fault of the majority of people who live in our country, but in some ways it's extremely karmic for us to be now in a dictatorship, because if those judges had actually listened, for example, Trump is a rapist as well. And if we had actually gone through and followed through and listened to the women and actually done right by them, we wouldn't be in a dictatorship right now. And if we had actually listened to Christine Blasey Ford, we wouldn't have a rapist in the Supreme Court. And now we just have a government of rapists, and maybe we always did, but because of people listening to rapists, we're in a dictatorship. And I don't know, that's stark, isn't it? So we're literally in a dictatorship because we don't value the voices of women, right? I don't know, it's just a little bit karmic, isn't it? I hope that everybody who put these people in office, I hope they suffer deeply, like truly, so that they can learn. But it's really sad. And the kind of people who continue to be complicit in these systems that hurt women so deeply, I hope they really sit with the suffering we're now in, as living in what's turning into a dictatorship, a fascist dictatorship, because we don't support women and we don't listen to women. And so now we've put all these rapists in charge, right? I don't know. It's just, let's sit with that deeply, like truly. Also been thinking about Megan Thee Stallion's case recently, and just about her, I was just, she came to mind the other day, and yeah, I don't know, thinking about also, I don't know, I've just really been thinking about violence against women recently, and just the sickness and just the cruelty, just the casual cruelty that I think we accept in men, and just how, like, wow, I don't know, I just think sometimes I love men. This is again not all men, whatever, but a lot of men are just really morally devoid, and I think it's interesting how we have gone. I won't go all into it, let's not. But yeah, I don't know, it's just a little bit like, wow, it just speaks to the values. I don't know how many women just continue to be hurt and hurt and hurt and hurt and hurt and hurts, and how deep that trauma is. And I think going back to Franz Fanon, just thinking about how deep that oppression runs, and the sort of the collective trauma that happens as oppressed individuals, because the oppression has just gone deeper and deeper. And now you put rapists in Supreme Court. Now they're like, I was just thinking about how like the cruelty, the casual cruelty of men, like they just enjoy hurting women. And now you put someone who hurt women once into Supreme Court, and now they're just enjoying hurting women more and just taking away our rights. And it's just sad. Sometimes it feels not even worth talking about, because I don't know, I lose my faith in men more every day. I don't want to, but I do, because they don't do anything, do they? They don't help us. They don't care. It's really, truly sad. But I want to believe that's not true, and there's a lot of good men in my life, so I don't want to delve into that thought process 100%, but it really sometimes just, the treatment that we're receiving right now as women, it just speaks volumes. It just speaks volumes over and over again, and just, our repression is just so deep. But on the other hand, as someone who deeply does believe in manifestation, not from a silly light, but as just like a universal truth that we do, that our perception of the world will like sort of reverberate into reality. I think that I can't allow myself to think that way too deeply, and I have to have faith in men, that they care. There's a lot of men who care, and they don't want to see women hurt like that. And it just, I don't know, because I don't know, you have to have faith and hope and believe, because if not, then there's nothing you can do. But I don't know, I had just been trying to keep developing like a deep sort of faith in the world and people around me, because I think that will reverberate out into the world when you have faith in people and you believe in them, even when it's hard. But it is hard sometimes, because just the conversations that I've even had with some people on some of my political videos, I've just been shocked. And it's to the point where, as a psychology person, it's deeply mentally ill at this point. I think it's like we don't look at, sometimes collectively at the sort of psychology that we experience collectively all the time as mental illness. But speaking to some of these people that I spoke to, particularly on my video about white men, and I was just trying to be like, create a bridge, and some of them came in with some things that I was like, wow, this, I would diagnose you with maybe being like sociopathic or something. Like, just somebody said like the things that they've said about empathy, and just how little empathy, there's a lot of men who are deeply empathetic, but I think there's a lot of men who also, I was like, wow, you can't appeal to their empathy, because they truly don't have it. And that's something that we've encouraged, and it just, as a society, and it just speaking volumes right now, just how little they care. And it's just like, wow, I don't know, how do you converse with people who don't have empathy? And just the amount of men who also say, oh, I developed empathy when I was like on shrooms. It's like, you didn't have it? Okay, that's cool, but it's just kind of like scary, I think. And it's just literally getting to a point where it's like a collective narcissism or something. Like, it's like an actual mental illness sort of level, I think, the kinds of things that I hear. And that's not even me trying to be like sassy or anything. It's just like, it's like a genuine worry and concern of mine. And I don't know, I don't know what to say about it or do about it. But it's just the amount that people don't want to listen, don't contain that empathy, can't face themselves, don't have emotional intelligence, and it's like you're talking to a brick wall. I don't know what to even say or do about it. It's really bad. Unfortunately, that lack of emotional intelligence leaves you incredibly susceptible to being emotionally manipulated, and manipulated by higher ups. Because I think the more emotionally intelligent that I've gotten, the more I've come to understand my own emotions and the emotions of others, the less I feel like I fall victim to propaganda, fall victim to people trying to sway me away from truth or things like that, because I have such a good sense of who I am, why I do what I do, and things like that. But I think that if you're really emotionally weak and you also are very emotionally intelligent, which a lot of the men who voted for, which I think a lot of times it's like it's not about emotion, the emotional weakness. I think the irony is that when you are so obsessed with not having empathy or not being kind, you lose a sort of flexibility, this sort of emotional flexibility that comes that inspires emotional strength and this ability to sort of understand the world. And I think that it's hard when you don't have emotional intelligence. You really don't have a very good sense of like, why am I like, somebody's manipulating you into anger, into frustration, into sort of all of these sorts of crazy emotions that you don't actually understand. Like, you don't know, like, you can't sit with like, why am I so angry? Why, like, how did I all of a sudden go from being like, I was a Democrat and all of a sudden I'm far right? And it's like, why do you think that happened? Things like that, that it's like, I don't think that you have a very good grasp of why you do what you do, and you're very susceptible to manipulation. So that's why it's extremely important that we teach people emotional intelligence. It's very important. I don't know. I feel like I keep having this guilt, like I should be sweetening up my reaction to the suppression and, oh, poor man, not all men, all this stuff. And, I think people really meet you with this thing of like, I think men feel really uncomfortable and really frustrated and really like, they don't like to be sort of implicated. I don't know how to put it, but I think that very often you get met with this like message to just sweeten yourself up and not isolate people and all these things. In the words of Bikini Kill, who I've been listening to a lot recently, I'm so sorry if I alienated some of you. Your effing culture alienates me. So that's the first thing. Go listen to Bikini Kill. But also, I think that it's extremely uncomfortable to be raped. It's extremely uncomfortable, I can tell you from experience. And it's not fun. It's not a light thing. It's not a little thing. It's extremely traumatizing. And I'm lucky that I'm here and that I'm good and that I'm using this for something powerful, but it's extremely uncomfortable. So I think they can, if you are upset, I think you can handle the discomfort a little bit. And if you're upset that I'm mad, or if you're thinking, I don't know, it's like, maybe turn around and tell your fellow men to stop doing it, and maybe we'll stop being mad. And I think it's extremely ridiculous to tell oppressed people to sweeten up their reaction. I see white people do this with black people a lot, and I feel sorry for that. And for all people of color, white people do this all the time, where we don't want to be, it's like, don't villainize me. And it's like, I don't know, I think it's probably extremely uncomfortable to watch people you love be killed and hurt. And I think that's probably extremely more uncomfortable than like us feeling guilty, And I see that with me and men, that sometimes I think men seem to want us to sweeten up the reaction. And it's like we are being raped and killed and stolen and having our agency stolen from us, and you don't even care. So I don't think I need to sweeten the reaction up, I think this is real. And yeah. And to the people who want to say not all men, I'm inviting you to leave a comment below about all of the activities that you've done to help contribute to the diminishing of the suffering of my gender. And I want you to tell me about all of the amazing sort of work that you've done to sort of undo the structure. If you're one of those not all men people, it's not just about you didn't rape somebody, but it's also about you going the extra mile and actually unpacking the structure within yourself and within others. Because if you're not actually contributing, then you're complicit. And if you're complicit, then the system is going to remain. So you're actually part of it. So that's why I'm saying, if you're going to say not all men, it's not just enough to say that, oh, well, I don't hurt people, but it's about how much have you sat and actually unpacked yourself today, and how much have you actually gone out to do something to make sure that we don't ever suffer like this again. So that's what it's really about. And if you're going to say not all men, please, I will like the comment below exactly what you do for me to not, and women to not suffer the effects of this again. I'm open to hearing it.
What are you doing? Replaying my earlier games. What on earth for? Looking for weaknesses in my play. I see. And? There aren't any.
Now that I've sufficiently angered myself and inspired myself, let me hop onto Zoom and we are going to fuel all of that anger and frustration into my literature review. Okay, here's where we left off. We have all of my sources. I'm going to go through and add some of the sources that I have read. So that's going to be my first order of business. I'm just going to zoom through that. The papers I'm adding right now are pretty interesting. So I've been reading these about structural dissociation these last few days and about dissociative identity disorder. And I found some pretty interesting things, but what I didn't know was that I love seeing beef between different like scientists or academics. I always think it's so funny because I know that when you have an idea, you're so like you've like thought it through so much and you're just so like attached to it. And yeah, it's interesting just like the little yeah, but I read this one. I actually read this one first, but it's this guy, he has his own sort of structural dissociation model, and these other researchers went through and tried to redefine it their own way, but they used his and like kind of tore into it, and he was like he was saying that they are being extremely dogmatic and that they are just it was like a really short one, but he was just like going into all of the things that he said that they said that was just like not accurate. And I don't know. I just thought I mean, it was extremely well written and I was agreeing with plenty of points, to be honest. But I was just thought it was really funny, just the idea of like beef. I don't know, like these sorts of little arguments that scientists get into that are just so interesting. But one of the big tasks that I have is I'm going to have to define all of my terms. I think that's going to be a different video probably, but that's one of the big things I've been highlighting. I need to define like dissociation, structural dissociation. I need to define like trauma, things like that. It's a harder task than you would think because people don't even agree 100%. So I kind of am put into the uncomfortable task of having to either just synthesize everything that everybody has said and just give like the most sort of comprehensive definition that I can, or I have to decide what I think is right. And that puts me in a bit of an uncomfortable position. What do I agree with? Because who knows, maybe I'm gonna be off. So I don't know. I need to learn how to do that. Again, these are all things that I'm learning on the fly because I've never done them before. So I'm just like, I don't know what's appropriate for me to do here. I think what I'm gonna try to do, I'm gonna write down all of these little definitions and things that I've highlighted and just try to see what's the essence. And I'm gonna say that I'm actually about to read the text that this guy was sort of tearing into. So I'm gonna see what I think, but right away, basically so one group is basically saying that they think that structural dissociation is dissociation. Like nothing else is actually dissociation. Some people try to put dissociation into this sort of spectrum, and there's experiences that are dissociation experiences, but don't necessarily imply trauma. So I'm trying to think of an example. I don't know, zoning out, for example. We all zone out, um, or getting really immersed in media, and where you sort of, you kind of forget where you are for a minute. Those are sort of normal experiences that some people would say are dissociation experiences, but for example, these researchers are saying absolutely not that those are not things like like your consciousness being limited or things of that nature are not dissociation. And they think that the only true dissociation would be they have a basis for this. They're basing this on the very first definition of dissociation that ever existed by this guy who I'm learning about. His name again, another French name, Pierre Genet. Probably sounded extremely American, but he has popped up in a lot of texts that I've read from a lot of different authors. But he's sort of like the father of I don't know trauma related anything. He's from what I'm learning, he sort of way back in like the early 1900s sort of made all of these definitions, and I was really impressed. I mean, his first definition of dissociation is really, I think, sophisticated for the time, and I think for the amount of work that we had on dissociation back then. And it's interesting how way back in the 1900s he identified this in really his earliest text on trauma, and now nobody's saying dissociation doesn't exist, but I think that his definition of dissociation is really aligned with what we would now call structural dissociation, and things like dissociative identity disorder really fall fit really well into this category. But now we're sort of contradicting his work and saying like that stuff isn't real, or it's social suggestibility and things like that. So that's been a really interesting sort of line of information for me to read, and just thinking about what do I agree with, I suppose. I honestly would still, I think it's useful to put all of those ideas about, I think I still personally think it's pretty useful to say that those sorts of non-traumatic forms of dissociation are dissociation, but I don't know, maybe they'll convince me otherwise. I'm not quite sure yet. The other thing that has been extremely interesting, I read this text the other day, and it's basically about, it was going into they talked to a lot of different psychiatrists, psychologists, all of these things, who had worked with patients who at the end of the day had dissociative identity disorder. And they basically asked them about their experience, and they were finding that the clinicians that were informed about structural dissociation had significantly easier time navigating patients with dissociative identity disorder just on every possible front. For example, there's this issue where that I was reading in this where because usually people with dissociative identity disorder have really severe trauma, and their symptoms can be extremely difficult to navigate because they and unless you really have an understanding of how their dissociation is operating, it seems really random. Like, not random, but for example, they really like their therapist and all of a sudden they hate them. Or it would just, they would be in therapy for long. This is very common for people with dissociative identity disorder. They'll be in therapy for a very long time and just be getting no results, like really getting nowhere. And they said it's really complex because, for example, sometimes people will get much better, and they'll be like, it's very really improving, and then all of a sudden they're back in the pit and they're self-harming and all these things. So it can be something really incredibly difficult for clinicians to navigate, and they can also, because of that, get traumatized themselves through interacting with, they can sort of develop this sort of trauma from the trauma of the individual. Or even this was really interesting to me, they can develop this sort of mutual dissociation effect where, because the person is dissociating, they start to dissociate, and so it's this sort of mutual emptiness. I don't know how to put it, but it was really important for me to hear that they had a much significantly easier time, especially even clinicians that later went on and learned about dissociation, things like that. They had an easier time, and it really wasn't working well for them to interact with patients that had these types of disorders using other, for example, CBT and these other types of therapy methods that had nothing to do essentially with dissociation. It was really important for them to be informed in dissociation. I feel like I read another one and I'm not finding it. Oh no, I added it. So yeah, but that really strengthens the idea that this is a really real thing. And I was actually particularly interested in the fact that there was one clinician who did not believe in dissociative identity disorder. They believe the, so many hard words today, iatrogenic model. I don't know how to say it, to be honest. The model that basically says it's a disorder of fantasy proneness and things like that. They actually believe that, and they didn't really believe in dissociative identity disorder. But then they saw one of their patients have a switch right in front of them, and it was really shocking for them because they didn't believe in dissociative identity disorder. So I guess after that, they had to find a new way. But yeah, a lot of people get stuck in trauma. I mean, stuck in treatment for a really long time, and it's an extremely difficult condition to treat. So, anyways, let's see how much we have here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, and I also have one that I forgot that I read for my undergraduate thesis. I'm gonna read it again to refresh, but it was really useful to explain the sort of controversy, and I want to make sure that that's included because it did actually also guide me here. That's one thing that I've been thinking about recently. I need to include the the sort of controversy element and explain because not only just because it's like, oh, that's sort of how I got here, but also because I want to know specifically like why, what is the controversy stemming from? What are we missing? Like that's a really important question for me. It's like, what are we missing? Because I want to be able to frame why it is that my work is important and what gap it's filling in the current literature. I mean, what I'm thinking so far, I mean, a lot of, yeah, I think the big thing is that people really, really lean hard into the whole about fantasy proneness rather than an actual sort of reality, like, biological kind of reality. And I would like to show that that's not accurate, that it is biologically sort of induced. Oh, no. But I thought maybe we could get more specific because why haven't we found this answer yet? It's like, I guess it's just the question I keep coming back to is like, what has stopped us from finding this answer in the past and why has it seemed so difficult? Maybe I have insider information and that's my luxury in a weird way, but I've just been sort of like, I doesn't seem that crazy to me. I don't know, but we seemingly have had such a hard time solidly saying yes, dissociation is like real, like it's like a real thing and this is why it's real. And it's like, I don't know. Didn't seem that hard to me, but again, I think I came in, I'm cheating. I have the background information up in my head, unfortunately. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay, 16 down. Okay, I might glitch out really bad, but I have 45 texts left to read, which is pretty solid. Somebody get me a new computer, please. I can't. I'm always having an issue with this computer. Did I stop glitching? Okay, great. Okay, so anyways, so I'm gonna put this all in a new file. Okay, so my goal is basically, I also would really like to get these organized, but I don't think that's gonna happen tonight. Ignore me glitching out. So basically, what I'm gonna do, let me show you. So for example, this one right here, the only thing, these are gonna be again like not necessarily perfectly worded, but they're just gonna be what I am gonna take from this. Okay, while I go crazy trying to find some of the text that I read before I started making everything into really neat folders, I've been thinking about dissociation and just I guess dissociative identity is sort of all these things. I've been reading all these texts and I've just been thinking, is it like a positive? Okay, I know there's positive symptoms and negative symptoms of dissociation. So I think the positive symptoms is what I was reading today. The positive symptoms are basically things like intrusive flashbacks, and then a negative symptoms would be something like amnesia. But what I'm wondering is an alter, is it a new thing that is made? Or is it like a chop down of something? I don't know exactly how to put that question, but it's like, is it like our brain is making a new thing, or is the old thing just getting chopped into pieces? You get me? Because yeah, that's just been kind of my question. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Okay, here, finally found this text. Very simple things that I took away from this that I'm going to include. So I want to say things that I like I know this is kind of true, but I if they didn't say it in the text, I don't know if I should say it, but I guess what's going to happen later is that I'm going to explain everything I know and then I'm going to end up citing these sources. So I guess that's something I still want to say because I think like I got this from just reading the text, but they didn't say it. It's just that it's what I understood. So, okay, I think this is it for this first one. These sentences are a bit clumsy, some of them, but they're sort of just little options for things that I can later throw into my introduction. So I'm guessing this is all going to go into a section. Maybe my methods section is my guess. I don't know if I'm going to go into this in the introduction actually. We'll see. I've never written an introduction nor method section for scientific research, so I have zero idea. I'm going to investigate. But I'm going to be honest, I don't 100% yet understand that last part about unsupervised learning, as the neural weight updates are only dependent on temporal. I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna have to ask ChatGPT to explain that to me. I don't really fully understand what that looks like and how that works. But I just know that it's offering a bioplausible solution. But I think that it's probably important for me to include that so that I can explain why I'm using it in the first place. So that's text number one. Maybe I'll make a little I'm gonna make a little color coding sort of situation. So anything that's related to the actual neural network is gonna be this light blue color. Wait, so then I'm not gonna include these yet fully, so take away everything that I haven't actually read. It's almost midnight. I hate my life right now so bad. I want to work on this 24/7 and actually do it and get it done. And it's like I have to go to sleep to go to all my other jobs that I'm engaging in. Let's at least get all of the texts for neural networks that I've read. So spiking neural networks and their applications. I'm getting a little bit nervous. I think this is just gonna maybe take more reading. I'm getting nervous because I don't understand all of the technicalities of these types of neural networks, and I that just makes me nervous that I'm gonna write this well. But I guess I'll have to figure out what is necessary for me to convey and what I can brush over. Well, I'll leave it at this for now with this text, but it's a very useful one because it actually goes into all of the specificities of the spiking neural network, exactly how they work and everything. I actually did read him. I read like almost his whole text and tried to see what I could understand, and but a lot of it was a little bit technical for me. So I guess we'll see. We'll see when it comes down to it what's going to be important. But this is the basics. I guess as long as I can explain and like defend why I've chosen what I've chosen for my method, that's the important part. Okay, this ended up being a little bit underwhelming because I wanted to get a lot done and um unfortunately I had to get a little bit of work done for my other job, but hopefully tomorrow I can do a little bit more. But this is basically the format that I'm going to use to just get all of the information. I hope that to get all of these sort of at least, some little points, some little bullet points down so that when it comes down to writing my text, I can just be like clip, 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 clip. Because these, I might actually made sure to write all of these paraphrased or through my own words so that I could use them as actual sentences if I wanted to. Hopefully that'll make it easy for me at the end because think about this. I'm gonna have 60, at least 60 texts with like just these little bullet points written. And so I'm hoping I can just cut and paste a little bit when it comes down to it. I think these sound close enough to the kind of writing that I see in academic texts that I've read, like scientific texts that I've read. So I'm just gonna keep doing this. Some of them are a little bit, uh, I don't know, a little bit bare bones right now. So I will be using Nengolohi because of its bioplausibility is obviously extremely bare bones. But I just wrote that for me to know why they actually mentioned like loihi again. I don't know if I'm saying that right. So it's very important for me to use that to defend my my choice in using Nengo. And I think I should read something about Nengo. I don't know. It's a little bit of an awkward overlap here between this is just like for pure academic honesty. I guess this is a conversation to think about. It's a little bit of an awkward overlap because there's things that, for example, I've asked ChatGPT to explain to me. So like I read this text. I think it was this one, but then I asked it, for example, I asked it like why are you having me use this specific thing in my neural network? Like why are you asking me to use this spike timing dependent plasticity? And it explained to me why it thinks that I should use this. So I think it's good for me to still read up and make sure that it convinced me. And I did read like all of this text myself, but I just want to make sure that I'm being extremely academically honest as I use ChatGPT because it's still important for me to make sure that I know everything and that I need to make sure that I don't make any jumps in terms of what I'm writing and jumps in like, well, why did you choose that? Why did you do that? It's like I want to make sure that that's also backed by literature, to keep it academically honest and not just me using ChatGPT to explain things. You get me? So that's something I just want to be really, really like on it about. And just keep most of it, I think, especially the parts about this, the only thing that I've really had to lean on ChatGPT a tiny bit for is this part with the neural networks. The other part is really stuff that I read myself, but in the past or that, but I think I have just started learning about neural networks. So I think that's my big section where I'm like, I will eventually have to lean on ChatGPT a little bit to explain things to me and just to make sure that I'm doing everything okay. So I just want to make sure that that part I am still being academically honest as I navigate that. So yeah, just for the sake of honesty, I think that's been a worry and hopefully I'll navigate that well. So yeah, I guess we're done for now. Okay, so it's been fun. We raged out together. We got inspired together. We worked on my literature review together. It's been a good time. Yeah, I think it's been really nice to get to this point. I think I'm getting to a really good point. I also have a lot. I have at least if I read everything that I have saved right now, I'll have probably up to definitely over 30. I'll probably be up to like the 40 point maybe. And I'm really excited to read everything that I saved. So once it gets to that point, I think that'll be really exciting. So yeah, next time, hopefully, I think what you'll see me do, I think I'm going to do a lot of this little literature review chunky chunk part on my own. And maybe you and I will meet up again for my definition making. I think the next step is going to be defining what is association, what is trauma, what is this, what is that. So yeah, I'll see you next time for that. Bye.